Hey everyone, we have another podcast coming up with Jimmy and Nishant, and we are, going to be talking about some fun stuff. Let's start with a quick intro, Nishant, and then we'll hand it over to Jimmy.
Hey, I'm Nishant. I'm a product manager at Walmart AdTech Group, and Jimmy and I went to the same MBA school, UNC, and that's how I thought it'd be like a fun throwback, but also a deep dive into his career. So, Jimmy, great to have you here. Excited to learn all about your Google days.
Absolutely. Yeah, great to be here. I'm Jimmy. I'm a product manager on Chrome OS. Yeah, excited to chat about some of my experiences at Google and other things between that.
Great, great. I think we can immediately jump into, some of the things that you've been doing recently. But to begin with, Jimmy, like, can you briefly touch upon like your journey, education history in India and then, US, and then how did you land your job as a product manager?
For sure, yeah. So I think like a lot of the folks in the Bay Area, I would say I did engineering back in India, worked there for a few years, and then decided that was not what I wanted to do. Came to the US, went to business school. After business school, I spent some time in consulting. So I worked in strategy consulting, did mergers and acquisitions, growth strategy. And then I think the travel and the lifestyle kind of got to me. I was like, okay, I need to change something. I think there's also this factor of you're giving a lot of good recommendations, but you're not living through actual implementation of things.
Yep.
Sure.
And so I wanted to change. And then that brought me to Google. Uh, and I started in a product strategy role at Google Cloud working on technical infrastructure. So building compute storage networking, there's a team that builds it for all of Google and cloud.
Yep.
So that's where I started, did that for a couple of years. And then I got an opportunity to work at a new product incubator called Next Billion Users. Um, and I can happy to chat more about that. But that's where I spent about 3 years, worked on 6 different products that we took from ideation to scale to even deprecation. And so awesome experience there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after doing that for a while, I was like, okay, let's try something other, like a bigger product, more established product at Google. And so most recently, I've been working on Chrome OS, and I focus on personalization and AI and the intersection of the two of how do you personalize the user's experience, but also kind of leverage GenAI to do that.
And that's quite a portfolio of products to look at, right? Like you started from an infra level, like typical cloud problems. I guess that was the thing. And that is the thing, even, now I'm at least like on the infra side, so I can get it. And then, moving to an incubator style of project, like which is so open-ended, and then finally moving to like the AI ML, which is a hot topic for now. But yeah, Nishant, if you have any questions, feel free to ask from here.
No, I feel like there's so many good topics that we could spend the rest of the day on, like AI especially, right? That's the hot topic. But I
Yep.
want to focus on the incubator piece of it, Jimmy, especially trying to get a sense for how were you structured within Google? Because today I wanted to be like a case study for folks outside Google, outside the Google incubator. Give us a sense for the structure, and also what were you guys trying to do? How was it different from the Googliness that the rest of the org was going after?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can share a little bit about the different incubator models I have seen just within Google itself.
Okay.
And then maybe talk about how we were structured and how that's different from the rest of the org. So I think one model that I have seen is just you are a completely different company, like bets within Alphabet, right?
Yep.
And so
Mm.
these companies focus on completely different business lines, and there are different legal entities. And having a different legal entity has a lot of pros and cons, right? When you're trying to start a new business. The second one I have seen is startup accelerators. So people within the company have really good ideas. Can be a product manager, a researcher, an engineer. They have a really good product idea. And Google essentially created this spot called Area 120,
Mhm.
where folks could incubate. So you're no longer a Google employee, really, to say. You are like full time working on something else, starting to incubate. And then, depending on how the product grows, maybe um, a product within Google acquires you And when they acquire you, you kind of get equity. So you're sort of a business owner, really.
Oh,
Right? And you're kind of being paid to do that. But there is no guarantees that you can come back, right?
got it.
Because you're kind of leaving your current role and your position and you're trying to do something new. But in general, a lot of folks had such fascinating experiences there and such relevant experiences that they always found a home back, or they created something that was so successful that it was acquired and they kind of got a piece of the equity when they were acquired. And the
Okay.
last one, which I worked on, was NBU, Next Billion Users. So we were still all Google employees. This was essentially Google venturing into new business lines and growth opportunities, either an extension of products within Google or new ideas that are adjacent to existing business lines. So these could be apps, these could be two-sided platforms like e-commerce platforms or things like that, or it could be in payments. So there are many different ideas, but we were all still working for Google and as Google employees, and that has its own pros and cons. Yeah.
Got it. One of it actually sounds like a YCOM almost, where you have your own incubator, people are there to guide you, but not necessarily in the weeds, right? So I want to focus on your incubator style because that's what I feel like you'll know the most. Can you give us a sense for how do you get into this program, or like, are you pitching ideas? People are giving you teams, or how does it work?
That's a great question. So there were some people who worked for the incubator itself, like you work for NBU.
Okay.
That's a group of people that are trying to create this platform where you can get new ideas and build products adjacent to Google business lines, right? So I was part of this group, and the roles there were, I'd say, very, very vague. I think it's one of the most vague roles I've had in my career because sometimes you're wearing the hat of an operating partner because Google's kind of investing money in these ideas. And there is like an investment in terms of resources. It's not direct money, but even if you give someone a headcount or a person, you're kind of investing money.
Sure.
And so I was working for a strategy and ops team, which oversaw the incubator as a whole, ran the incubator, and then work with the teams themselves. So if you think of it like an investing partner, but then also take the role of an operating partner, which is once the product team starts going, you are part of the team. So you are there from the ideation, helping through the phases, asking the hard questions, but also helping the team grow. And then eventually taking it to the next phase to say, okay, should we spin this off as its own entity? Or it should be merged back to another part of the company, or it should be killed. Like there is no scope for it and it should be killed. So that kind of was my role within the team, and we were a group of folks. The ideas to your question came from anyone within Google. There was a process. And a lot of people could submit ideas, and ideas came from all over the place. UX researchers getting so deep into a conversation with some users where they get an insight. And then they say they've kind of done some initial evaluation and they want to take it to the next level, or engineers or product managers. So the ideas came from anywhere. There was a pitch that people put together. Based on that pitch, some ideas were selected, went through different phases, which I'm happy to chat more about, but it went through these phases.
Sorry, go ahead, Shruti.
So I'm trying to understand, like, what made you, jump from, your infrastructure setup, what you were doing at GCP? I'm assuming it was still at like is nascency stage, like GCP now has started to become mature to like next billion users. What made you take that jump? And then if you can touch upon what was the biggest challenge, like what were the points at when you were doing this incubator project, like you were like, oh my God, did I do the right thing?
Oh my God. There were a lot of challenges, but I think answering your first question first. So when I was working on the technical infrastructure part, that team builds technical infrastructure for all of Google.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine search, YouTube, like everything is already on it. It's a pretty massive infrastructure, the largest in the world when I joined at that point. And it is growing portion of it because of the cloud business, which is also growing, right? So it's starting to serve that. So it was really fascinating time, especially looking from a strategy perspective of how these evolve. That said, I've always wanted to work on smaller products. I think I had worked in large organizations in consulting and at Google at that point. And someone I knew or worked with was working at NBU. And they reached out, and that's when I saw the opportunity. So I didn't go looking for it really, but it came across me. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, this is something I wanted to do for a while, trying out, and I jumped on board.
Just one quick question on that. So in this case, someone reached out to you, but if I was submitting an idea to the strategy team or the general pool of ideas and it gets picked, would I have the option to be a part of the NBU and then take it forward?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think that's another way to enter. I entered as like a person working on the incubator itself. I think going back, Shruti, to your other part of the question, which is challenging parts, I'd say at a high level, it's way more challenging than working on a product that already is successful. I feel like incubating anything from scratch is exponentially more difficult. And all ads are stacked up against you, because I think for a product to be successful, you have to have a good idea. It has to be big enough. You have to build the right product. You have to scale it the right way. People should be willing to pay for it. So all of these things so many things need to happen right for it to be successful, but only a few of them need to fail. For like the whole idea to go like down, right? And so the odds are stacked up against you. And so I think at different phases, I would say there are different things that I found challenging here.
And in terms of success, sorry, Shruti, I was going to ask, in terms of success, are you being judged against, have you become profitable? Or is your bar much higher, saying, okay, profitable is not good enough. We need the next big thing for Google. So success is not a little bit far off for you guys.
That is a great question. And I feel the answer is, of course, it depends. But our objective was to build a product that gets to the next 100 million or 1 billion users, right? So that is one objective. But I feel a secondary objective always is it has to build a sustainable business. I mean, it is entirely possible to build a product that can get to 100 million users while losing ridiculous amounts of money. And at some point, someone has to ask the question of like, how are you going to make a viable business out of it? So I think that the objective was twofold. Of course, you want to get to a big idea, but you want to make a successful business out of it. When you do it in the life of the product during the stages, and how you do it, I think varies a lot by the product itself.
I mean, like at the end of the day, it has to be a sustainable business. Like to your point, like you don't want to create something, get these users, but like take a hit at because like Google is a public company. It has a bottom line that it represents in Wall Street. So anything that you're doing, it should have a way towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is true not just for this idea or Google. I think this should be true for any new business or even a feature within an existing product. I think should tackle it from this angle.
So what was your most favorite product that you did as part of the next billion user program?
Yeah, I don't think I should be choosing favorites. Really, I think all of them were my favorite.
So we always have a favorite child. It's separate to me, at least in my family.
Yeah, no, I think all products were super interesting. All products took a ton of time. I think maybe I can talk about the most recent one. The last one that I worked on was TaskMate, which was a micro-tasking platform where there were folks who essentially, if you think of AI/ML and you want tons of training data and good quality data, how do you gather it at scale? And so the objective of the platform was companies who want data, pay people for sharing that data. And it's a platform that enables that. So it's a two-sided platform.
What kind of data are we talking about over here? Like any
Yeah.
specific use cases?
Yeah. So voice data. If you're training an assistant, Alexa, Google Assistant, you need tons of voice data. Now you can say, oh, now AI can there are algorithms that train themselves, but the thing is you always need to fine tune. You need to fine tune to a local accent. Even like, for example, within the US, different parts of US have different accent to their English. If
Right.
you want to go down to that level and product quality, you need really good training data. So voice is one, images is another. You want to try and train an image recognition algorithm, but you want to go after a specific use case, then you need a lot of that data. And it's surprisingly hard to get good data, good quality data.
How did you figure out that this is something that you should be investing? Like, because I'm saying, right, like there's so many people who'd be thinking
Yeah,
about, as soon as you think about AI and ML, the accuracy is the biggest problem that everyone starts thinking about. So
yeah,
how do you think that you should be investing your time and energy on that?
yeah. This is a great question. So the idea for this product came from a PM who was an engineer who worked on AI/ML.
Okay.
Okay.
And while working on that, so I think that was the genesis of the idea. But then the question is, should we invest in it and is it worth building?
Yeah.
And so I think at the ideation phase, which is true for most products, is we are trying to figure out whether there is a user need and whether there is an unmet user need.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, of course, be a user need, but is it unmet? I think
Yeah.
is a completely separate question.
Yeah.
And the third part is, can you build a business around it? But I think it goes in this rank order, right?
Yep.
There's a need, it is unmet,
Yeah.
and there is potential to build a business around it. And this is all very high level.
Yeah.
So in this particular idea, from the team itself, there was a very known unmet need, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they knew they had worked on it. They knew there was a need, there's an unmet need. Now, there are many ways this team knew it, and within the organization, we had a lot of knowledge about the space, so we knew all of this.
Yep.
If someone doesn't have this, there are many ways to go about finding it, right? And I feel like as you're doing this, maybe just to take a step back and say, as you're going through any idea, you're trying to optimize for time and resource, because those are the biggest constraints that you have at any point. You're investing your time and you're investing your resources, meaning either yourself or money or whatever. And through the whole incubation process, you're trying to optimize time and resource. And so in this ideation phase, we had this idea and we were saying, okay, how do we quickly, the fastest way, get to the answer of these things? And so it can happen in many ways. Maybe the team has a very strong hypothesis based on past experience, or we go talk to users, or we went and talked to experts. So there are organizations like GLG or others who can get you in touch even with a VP of an existing product, and you can just hop on a call with them and talk for an hour. And I cannot tell you how amazing these kind of insights are. So many ways you can get to this point of user need, it is unmet, and I can build a business around it.
And how do you make sure that we are being unbiased, Jimmy? Like one of the things that I've seen happen time and again with strategy teams in the past, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for confirmation bias. They're trying to look for all kinds of data that says this is the right idea, right?
Yeah.
You get to, as a product manager, say, okay, yeah, yes, strategy wise, it makes sense, but implementation wise, there are going to be hurdles. This is not like an unmet need. This is not a need. What kind of challenges did you face in that space?
Yeah. So founders generally have a bias. And I believe in this phase, they should have a bias.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
But there's certainly bias. And I think having a third person perspective is one.
Okay.
Talking to people, which is you need to get qualitative and quantitative data points, right? Qualitative is you talk to the users, you spend hours in conversation. But if it's like this microtasking platform, it's a two-sided platform. You have two users, people who are going to pay to get the data, but people who are actually going to do the work.
Yeah.
And so you need to validate both sides. And you can talk to experts if there are other companies in the space, which there were. And so we can talk to experts and say, how is your business doing? Okay. What are some pitfalls you face? So you do all this learning, but I will caution one of the things I have seen is analysis paralysis in this phase.
Yeah.
Which is you can go into endless debates and discussions about why an idea is not a good idea. But at some level, you have to have the faith. And generally, the founder, the PM, has to have that positive faith after doing some, so it's an art and a science.
Yeah.
You get some data points, but there is an art to it. And I think having that I will do it positive attitude is very much required in this phase. And I think you also need to be time bound.
Yeah.
Meaning, and this is where I'm saying time and resource, right? So you have to say this phase, I'm not going to spend more than 3 months or a few weeks. It depends on the idea.
Right.
But you can't spend more than that. At that point, you have to make a judgment call. And that's where the art comes in of the founder, the person taking the risk, really, putting either their career or their money on bets, saying, I am going to go after this. So I think that's super important.
Yeah.
This sorry, Shruti, go ahead. I am like just very excited about the idea, so keep asking all the questions. Go ahead.
No. I think this is like a general, like even as a PM, right? Like this is a general question that we get asked, like as you become a portfolio manager, like why this thing is so important to do at this point. And there's so many debates, there's so many opinionated, like opinions that comes your way, like, okay, this should be done this way versus, A, B, C. There are like 3 different things that you could take, and you have to pick a route and you have to optimize for, like that you don't you can fail, but you have to pivot immediately. So that's, I can resonate so well with like what you're trying to say, because we are doing some similar things at Snowflake, and like we hit into like, is this the ideal solution? And we are like, let's at least make a solution, get it in hand of customer as a POC, get feedback, and then repivot if need be. That sometimes becomes very crucial to break that cycle of analysis paralysis.
I also feel like, Jimmy, like it feels slightly different. You can tell me if I'm wrong. In the sense that in the product world, I'm constantly thinking, okay, how do I place a bet where it doesn't end up in nothing? Like if I do something, it goes wrong, I should be able to make something else out of it. At least at the stage that we are in our careers, right? Versus in Incubator, it almost feels like the sooner you get to a point of, okay, is this going to be the size of the idea that I need it to be? The sooner you get there, the better. And then you're always pivoting in there. But then you also have the option of saying, okay, I'll completely sunset this because this is not making sense after a point.
Yeah. No, I think, yes, parts of it I definitely agree with. I will say, though, even when you're in a large organization building a product, I don't believe it's 100% true that, okay, I am trying to build something.
Sure.
But I want to make something out of it. I'd rephrase that to say, I want to build something.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to pivot if I have to.
Sure. And how is it different from the earlier one in your mind?
Which is when you say, I want to build something, but I always want to have a backup. You see, you're always putting your feet in 2 boats at a time.
Got it.
I feel as to incubate something new from scratch, it takes a lot of grit and resilience. You have to have both, I feel, from personal experience, watching other founders too. You have to have both your feet in that idea at that time. There is no backup options, but you're always open to pivot. You're always like, and I think that's a mindset difference, which is you're not thinking of a backup option. You never have a backup option, but you're okay if you have to pivot. I think there's a slight difference. Really.
Sure.
And so it's very same for an incubator too. I have seen products where we started with an idea of something, which ended up completely different because we started with something and we built some hacky things to test it with users. And when we started testing it, the feedback that we got made us realize, actually, what they're looking for is something completely different. And so we made a hard pivot.
Yeah.
But before we made the pivot, we were 100% all in on that part.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Shruti, do you want to add something?
No, I think that makes so much sense. I mean, I could just resonate with what Jimmy is saying. Like, you have to be all in when you have an idea, and then you also need to be open to make the pivot because, customers are telling you to do that otherwise. So,
Yeah.
That sense, like Incubator does feel like a startup in the sense like you
Yeah.
have to be able to motivate him. Yesterday, we were talking to another speaker, and they were talking about how passion is one of the most important things. There's so much uncertainty involved just in the product life, and if you're talking about that 0 to 1 kind of products, it's even more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And to be able to drive yourself, the team towards that direction when there's not enough data, not enough conviction, right? I think that takes a lot of grit and passion, to your point.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And I think it is even more challenging within a large organization when you're trying to build something new in a product.
Yep.
You see, you have a lot more people to answer to. And the more people to answer to, the more questions there are,
Yeah.
and the more doubt there is.
Yes.
And the more doubt there is, the lower the morale of the team is.
Mhm.
And so there has to always be one champion who's like, no, this is why we should believe in this. And of course, I think we have to be open to the idea that most products will fail,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? So you have to be a little crazy and highly motivated to do that.
Yep.
Almost
Yep.
like the glass is like 1/10 full. What are you talking about, right? There's still some water in there. What do you know?
Yeah. I think it is important to showcase, like going back to your initial question, Nishan, it is important to showcase that you learned.
Yes.
Mhm.
Meaning, yes, you've been through failures, but there always has to be some learning. Even within the company, if we sunset a product, the first thing we talked about is a retrospective and learnings.
Yes.
Sure.
And I think when you go through a lot of failures, I don't think I can really say I know how it works now, but I definitely know how it doesn't work. And when you do it a few times, you're learning common pitfalls, not to fall. So I'm happy to chat about like different phases, pitfalls I have seen commonly. But like this is the thing, which is I learned. I went through these phases and we had failures and I learned pitfalls across the different stages, which at least I won't repeat those again. There could be others which I have never seen and I could fall for them.
Yeah, I
Totally
think
bang
that,
in.
that would be a great topic if you can touch upon like some of the pitfalls that you have seen in every phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe before we talk about that, let's talk about the stages, right? How we structure them. But I mean, any company can do it
Yes.
their way. But
Yeah.
basically, you have this ideation phase
Yep.
where you just have the idea.
Mhm.
Then you have this phase of kind of getting the MVP out and establishing product market fit. This is what I would call it, right? I think this phase is like you're establishing product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't even need a product to establish product market fit, and I can talk about that. But you're establishing product market fit. And then once you think you have a product market fit, then you're scaling the business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole different challenge and mindset. And the scaling takes many phases. So essentially, till you establish product market fit, you're bringing it 0 to 1.
Yep.
Scaling is you can go from 1 to 100 and 100 to 100 million and 100 million to a billion. And I think these are all phases that I've fortunately had the opportunity to see within Google because they're our product at all stages.
Sure.
And the last part is sunset, which is
Yep.
making this hard decision of like, when is it time to call it quits? It's one of the toughest decisions, especially with people who spend all this time and effort.
Mm-hmm.
You've invested time, resources, and how do you call it quits? So the first phase, the ideation, common pitfalls, one, spending too much time in analysis paralysis. I cannot tell you, it is way more common than you would think. And it more happens with people who have worked for larger organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are used to like, even I have done this. I'm used to like collecting data and I want to go talk. I mean, I can spend endless amount of time in this, but I feel this is a very common pitfall. Second is not being time bound.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Third is the team itself. Like either you as an individual, at this stage, there's nothing. You as an individual or the 2 or 3 group of people, I cannot emphasize how important it is to have the right group of people with you, either as mentors or your co-founders.
Sure.
Yeah, it is extremely important, right? So this phase. Then I think comes this, okay, you have this idea and you've said, yeah, I think users really want this. I think no one else is serving this need. And I feel like, okay, I can scale it. So you have to have some idea of how big the opportunity is. It can't be like there's only 60 users for this out there in the world. It
Yeah.
can't be a personal idea. I like doing this. So I think you have to validate. This is very important. And it really, the more work you do upfront about these things, the less troubles you have later in the phases. And so, okay, you have this and you're like, okay, and I create a pitch. This is the user pain point. This is how big the market could get. And this is how I'm going to build it. And at this point, like, there's 99% chance your idea is going to fail. Like, this is too early. I think the next phase is very, very important, which is a lot of teams are saying, start building product or like jump into, okay, now I think this is a time where the team should take a step back. Like, they've made the pitch, they have the investment and the resources. Take a step back and ask themselves, what are the key hypotheses I need to test?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the fastest and cheapest way to test them?
Mm-hmm.